Let's get it on then, shall we? Mwah. Welcome to Sex on the Peach, your weekly hump day dose of everyone's favourite untalked about topic, sex. Let's get honest, let's get open, let's get comfortable, and let's get in to this week's show. Friends, lovers, listeners, good morning, happy hump day, and happy Sex on the Peach day. First of all, an apology. I know I've been absent for a few weeks. I really had to take a minute out to deal with some life shit. And it's always so important to me to put together content for this podcast that is helpful and informative and presented in the right way. And I don't ever want to throw things together for the sake of just getting an episode out, because that really defeats the intention of the entire podcast, which is to help, not just to create content. So I felt it was necessary to take a breath so that I could come back and tackle these topics in a way that I feel is productive. And even though the episode on porn is literally ready to go, something else has come up that I feel the need to speak on, because I feel really passionately about it. For anyone who knows me personally, they're probably accustomed to me getting on my soapbox about things that I feel strongly about. But to the Sex on the Peach listeners, welcome to my first rant episode, and welcome to this side of my personality. Buckle up for the rollercoaster hurtling straight towards the fiery pits of hell. I always try my best to look at both sides of every situation, but this is something that I am becoming so increasingly frustrated with that I gotta just let it out. There are no questions this week. Let's just get the fuck into it. This is the Jonah hill I'm willing to die on. Okay, first up, some context. What has Jonah Hill done? Well, for a start, Jonah Hill is not the first person, nor will they be the last, to participate in the kind of behaviour we're going to be discussing on today's episode. This is just one very public example of something that happens all the fucking time. It's just fortunate for the podcast that this particular celebrity fit into my desire for a punny title. But yes, Jonah Hill has been in the middle of a shitstorm of controversy this week after their previous partner, Sarah Brady, shared a number of text screenshots, or receipts, as we call them these days, from their time together during their relationship. Now, these text messages showed Jonah Hill supposedly establishing boundaries that he needed to put into place in their relationship. So let's talk about these so-called boundaries. Jonah Hill's boundaries were that for their relationship with their partner to continue, she was not allowed to post pictures of herself in a bathing suit, go surfing with men, model, have friendships with women who are in unstable places and from her wild recent past, beyond getting a lunch or coffee or something respectful, post sexual pictures, have boundaryless, inappropriate friendships with men. For further context, Sarah Brady is a literal professional fucking surfer. This is like someone telling me that their boundary is that I cannot be in a musical where I have to pretend to fall in love with another character. It is suggested that if these boundaries are not adhered to, that it must mean they are not the right partners for each other. Now, this, to me, is even more concerning considering Jonah Hill specifically has actually been attending therapy for years and been relatively open about their own journey with their mental health. Because the mark on boundaries has been severely missed. And that is really what we are going to get into today. Because this is really just a small part and a small example of a much bigger conversation in which people are literally manipulating therapy language as a way to try and exert power and control in their relationships. And that is not only incredibly dangerous and destructive to personal relationships, it's also a huge fuck you to the work that therapists are putting in to try and help people with their mental and emotional health. And if we see more and more people adopt this behavior, twisting these psychology buzzwords for their own benefit, I know I would start to doubt the power of therapy. Because why is therapy pumping out controlling manipulators masquerading themselves as healed or boundary empowered? I know I probably, as someone who is training to be a therapist, take very personal offense to this whole thing, which I appreciate informs my opinion on the matter. But for the people who actually want to do the work, therapy is a life-changing tool. But you can't just talk the talk. You also have to walk the fucking walk. You have to practice what you preach. Or peach, for the sake of another terrible pun. You cannot just go to therapy and use it as an excuse to treat people like shit. Do not blame therapy or therapists for the fact you are essentially utilizing your insecurities to try and control other people's behavior. Because no decent therapist would condone that behavior. And if any therapist out there would consider Jonah Hill's demands healthy boundaries, I would suggest that their right to practice be called into question, because that is what we would call a red fucking flag. That red flag is so big it's giving matador energy. You can dress your insecurities and your controlling behavior up in whatever pop psychology language you choose. But if it looks like a duck, and it swims like a duck, and quacks like a duck, it's probably a fucking duck. Now, I don't think an episode of Sex on the Beach has gone by where I haven't said the word boundary about 128 times. Boundaries are important. They are imperative in any relationship. A friendship, a romantic partnership, a sexual relationship. We all have to have boundaries. They are the ways in which we literally protect ourselves. They are a huge part of the consent conversation. You're probably all sick to death of me saying the word boundary, to be fair. But for the sake of today's conversation, let's roll it right back. What is a boundary? A boundary is an emotional, physical, sexual, or psychological limit that helps people to maintain their individuality, their identity, their autonomy, their sense of personal space. Again, both emotionally and physically. Boundaries are something we put into place as guidelines on how we interact with others whilst protecting our own well-being. And they help to establish what is acceptable or comfortable for us in different situations and or relationships. They help us maintain self-respect and establish a sense of autonomy. Now, I have seen people find ways to siphon Jonah Hill's behaviour into this bracket and try to make it make sense in a positive light. No. No, 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 no. And when I say that I see that people have defended Jonah Hill's behaviour, I'm sorry to say this because men, you know I love you, but it has been hugely, predominantly cishet men. And the only therapist that I have seen speak out in support of Hill's actions was indeed also a man. And I hate that because men, you know that I am rooting for you to do better. And I feel like I have to disclaimer myself and be like, obviously not all men, which is fucking stupid because if I point out something that has happened by the way of any other gender identity, I don't feel the need to say not all. And that's literal patriarchal bullshit still existing and making us feel like we need to comfort and appeal to the egos of men. Yes, the men who may not be a part of this absolute cesspit of nonsense, but still men. So men, do better. I'm a bit over the concern of being labelled anti-men just because I'm pointing out that some of you are acting like archaic fucking heathens. If you don't know by now that I'm here for the men, because I'm here for fucking all of you, but if you don't know that I'm here for the men, then I do not know what to tell you. I want us all to do better. I want to do better. But we have to be able to call the situations when we see them. And this has not been cute to see that so many men seem to think these boundaries are acceptable when they are really just abusing therapy language to maintain traditional power dynamics in relationships and control women. There is a huge part of me that is sadly not surprised because, as always, I blame the society we've all grown up in for this behaviour and these attitudes. But there is enough information out there now for us all to do better. I have also seen some women agree with Jonah Hill, and to that I say, please take a moment to address your internalised misogyny. It's not okay for a partner to treat you this way, and I'm sorry that society and the media have made you believe for even a second that it is. People may have preferences, again, something I think that we are taught, but telling other people to conform to your preferences is, again, a form of control. If you are someone who doesn't want to date women who post photos in swimwear, or have friendships with men, or apparently even women who are deemed unstable, the hypocrisy, honestly, then you need to make peace with the fact that you cannot date anyone who wants to do those things. You need to make peace with the fact that anyone who wants to do those things is not going to be a match for you. You don't begin a relationship with another person and then say, a boundary for me is that you stop doing all of the above. Because the absolute foundation of a boundary is that it's what you can control for yourself. It is not something you place on another person to control them. Sure, you might meet someone who doesn't want to post photos in swimwear, or have friendships with men, or unstable women. And if you do, cute, good for you. What a match made in questionably problematic heaven. But I would suggest that actually your therapy going forward is utilized to address your deep-rooted insecurities towards your partner being in the company of other men? And why does it make you feel threatened to the point that you feel the need to make inappropriate requests of your partner and issue them with ultimatums? Take some fucking responsibility for yourselves. We all have insecurities. Stop blaming other people for triggering them and expecting them to fix them for you by adhering to your terrible set of rules. It isn't going to help anything. Once one rule is in place, another comes, another comes, another comes. It's a downward spiral of relationship prison, and it's never ending. So take some accountability and actually do the work that your therapist is trying to help you to do. I don't want this to sound like it comes from a place of lack of empathy and compassion. I have a lot of empathy and compassion for people dealing with past trauma, lack of trust, heavy insecurity. I want these things to be addressed and helped and moved forward from in healthy, growing environments. But I simply cannot condone these things being used to sabotage and destroy another human being. If someone else's behavior makes you feel uncomfortable, it is your responsibility to leave, not try to force them to change to fit into your vision of what you think they should be. If you want to date someone who doesn't post photos that you deem thirsty on Instagram, then don't date someone who does and then try to change them. Not a thing. You gotta let people live their lives, and then you can work out for yourself if that is a dynamic that is going to realistically work or not. I've been fairly open in the past about feeling icky towards people spending a lot of time aggressively liking posts of hundreds, thousands of people they literally do not know on social media. And that is because for me, it elicits a feeling of objectification, which I don't like seeing so brazenly in a day and age where I hoped we would be moving away from that. I'm also a quality time gal. And I'm like, how are you putting real time into your connections and relationships if you're spending that much time scrolling? So essentially, that's not really for me. If I embarked on a relationship with someone who was into that, it's up to me to decide if that's something I feel comfortable with or not. Is it something I might have a conversation with a partner about? Yes. Is it something that I'm going to issue an ultimatum to a partner about? It's the Instagram posts or me. Hell fucking no, absolutely not. If that's what you want to do, you go and live your best Instagram spree life, babe. And if I don't want to stick around and be a part of it, guess what? I don't have to. And yes, I know it's difficult and feelings get involved and it's not as black and white as that. But controlling someone is very simply, literally never okay. And demands are something that are so far removed from anything a semi-decent therapist would ever endorse as reasonable boundaries. Also, unhealthy boundary enforcement is detrimental to not only the well-being of the other people in your life, but also your own. And enforcing them in these destructive ways is only going to lead to negative fucking consequences. So let's look at some of the ways in which boundary enforcement is unhealthy. 1. Setting rigid and inflexible boundaries is going to create a really unpleasant, hostile, controlling environment. It will prevent open communication because people will be too scared to fucking talk, and it eliminates the chance of compromise. Rigid boundaries are probably going to result in strained relationships and isolation. Not cute, not sustainable. 2. Enforcing boundaries through aggression, violence, or intimidation is not only unhealthy, but also fucking dangerous. Using force or threats to maintain boundaries can lead to harm, it can escalate conflicts, and it goes without saying, it is absolutely not okay. It's literally assault. If anyone ever tries to do this to you, if you can, run. 3. What we're seeing in the example of Jonah Hill, manipulation and guilt tripping. Some people choose to enforce boundaries by manipulating or using guilt as a tool. This can involve emotional blackmail, passive-aggressive behaviour, or making others feel responsible for their well-being. It erodes trust and it causes severe emotional harm to all parties involved. Controlling behaviour is never acceptable. Get out as soon as you can. Number 4, lack of respect for other people's boundaries. Unhealthy boundary enforcement can also manifest as disregarding or violating the boundaries of others. This can look like invading personal space, disregarding consent, or dismissing other people's needs and preferences. Again, it completely undermines trust, and that is harmful to any relationship. Not okay. It's really crucial to remember that healthy boundary enforcement involves clear communication, respect for others' boundaries, and a willingness to find a balance that benefits everyone involved. If you find yourself struggling with boundary enforcement or experiencing unhealthy boundaries from others, then I would strongly suggest seeing a therapist. But you got to be doing it for the right reasons and not as a tool to make people believe your boundaries to be more feasible just because you go to therapy. Because yes, therapy is incredibly beneficial for so many people. But there are situations like this where it may be unhelpful or less effective. It's important to me to say at this time that therapy is never a one-size-fits-all solution, and different approaches may work better for some people than others. But if a person is not genuinely motivated or ready to engage in the process of therapy, it will completely hinder their progress, if they progress at all. Therapy requires active participation and a willingness to explore and make changes. So if someone is resistant or actually just brazenly uninterested in therapy and just going so that they can say they are in therapy, it's not going to be particularly helpful or produce any real progression. Therapy only works best when people are open to self-reflection, personal growth, and implementing strategies discussed in therapy sessions. It's very fucking important to remember that therapy is a collaborative process, and honest communication between a client and a therapist is essential. If you are walking into a therapy appointment and lying, it is literally pointless. And I say that as someone who sat through therapy sessions with a partner who was a pathological liar. Literally pointless. So people can go into therapy sessions and lie, and again, utilize the response they receive off the back of those lies to then manipulate people. It's not what therapy is fucking for. Stop manipulating the system and stop manipulating your partners. And also, there are sadly some not so fantastic therapists out there. So I would actively always suggest exploring different therapists and or approaches to find the one that resonates best with you. I've known some people go to therapy and on speaking to me about their therapy sessions, it basically just sounds like they're talking with someone who seems to validate everything they say and allow them to sit in their victim complex. And I'm like, yo, that sounds more like a friend you're going for coffee with that doesn't want to call you out than a therapist. I've also known friends have therapists who relate their issues in therapy to their own personal experiences. That's a no. Therapists should not be speaking to their clients from a place of personal bias or experience. So, yes, there are issues on both sides, and a good match is really essential to build this work. I also appreciate therapy is a huge fucking privilege and sadly not something that is available to everyone, because I think pretty much every human alive could benefit from it. And while I'm at it, I'm going to expand a bit on this new trendy therapy language everyone seems to be such a fan of. Boundaries is not the only word that has come out in the TikTok generation of therapy speak. Buzzwords such as toxic, gaslighting, narcissist, triggered, trauma dumping, trauma bonding, which is used incorrectly most of the time, but we'll get onto that shortly, and even self-care are literally popping up everywhere, whether it's publicly on social media or in personal conversation. All supposedly legit because they are terms adopted straight from the mouths of the therapists themselves. They've seemingly become part of people's daily vocabulary and are constantly being used to either explain or justify poor behaviour in all sorts of relationships across the board. But what we are sorely missing is the fact that a lot of these terms are not used often, if at all, in actual therapy. I've been in and out of therapy throughout my life. And aside from one of my ex-partners actually being diagnosed with narcissistic personality disorder, I don't think a single therapist has ever used the term toxic or red flag or even gaslighting in any appointment I've ever had. Social media has given us the gift of coaches and influencers. Sure, some of whom are absolutely brilliant, but some of whom are unfortunately actually completely unqualified and just giving us the privilege of their unsolicited advice all over our social platforms. Before anyone comes for me, yes, I do know that I'm still on my path to becoming a doctor of this exact topic. However, I do have some qualifications already in sex and relationship education. So I will pull my certificates out for you faster than I can say living your truth. So let's not go there. I'm a little bit qualified. Let's move on. Okay, so back to social media and the throwing out of trendy buzzwords and terms that will lure people in. Often, this advice is unhelpful and reductive. Not every person who posts seductive photos on Instagram is a narcissist. Not every person who simply isn't interested in continuing to date you is toxic. These words are being taken and run with to the hills and being abused to the point that they actually dilute the conversation about actual narcissism and actual toxic behaviour, both of which are actually incredibly destructive things. Dating a narcissist or someone who gaslights you is actually fucking terrifying. It's not dealing with someone posting thirst traps. It's dealing with someone whose behaviour hurts your actual health and compromises your actual quality of life. It literally erodes your sense of self-worth and safety. Dating someone who doesn't possess empathy or exhibits sociopathic tendencies is scary. It's difficult to get out of. I particularly empathise with Sarah Brady because my ex-partner, who was abusive and all of the above terms, behaved in some very similar ways. I once posted a photo of my face on my social media platforms to promote a show I was heading to record a cast album for, And publicly, this partner wrote, "You look so beautiful. I'm so proud of you." So that everyone reading it thought, what a lovely supportive partner. Hashtag couple goals. And then he immediately texted me privately and said, "Why are you posting photos like that, you fucking slut? Who is that photo even for?" It's manipulative. It's deeply scary. It's probably what can feasibly be deemed as toxic. But that's not the word my therapist ever used to describe it, because TikTok therapy and real therapy are two very different things. Because therapy actually rarely focuses on the behaviour of another person, but rather on, one, how those behaviours might have made you feel, and secondly, why they may have made you feel that way. Therapy is often best used as a guidance to help lead people to their own conclusions. It doesn't resemble TikTok videos on how to aggressively cut out toxic people who are affecting your authentic self, or how to examine the red flags of every person in your life. Sure, there's a space for doing those things, but the new attitude towards this therapy language seems to come more from a place of actually embracing a whole new level of selfishness and being unwilling to compromise and cutting out any single person who gives you a reason to hold a mirror up to yourself and feel a level of discomfort. And none of that is behaviour that is endorsed by therapists. Yo, that's not how growth happens, friends. We all got shit to look at and deal with. Life is messy. Yes, sometimes we outgrow relationships. Our values no longer align. Our vibes change. It happens, and it's shit, and it's painful. But we shouldn't be prioritizing disconnection over communication. Yes, of course, some of these terms are absolutely rooted in psychology and psychotherapy. For example, triggered was coined by psychologists to describe the PTSD that people were suffering after the First World War. And it's a vital term. Many people suffer from trauma and feel triggered by experiences and behaviour moving forward from that trauma. But the term is, again, becoming diluted. And also what people fail to recognise is that our triggers are our responsibility to address and deal with. And I get that that's something that feels unfair because those traumas and triggers are often caused by the behaviours of other people. For example, I've been open about some of the sexual abuse I've experienced in the past and about the event where a partner threw a candle full of wax all over me. And for a long time after, I didn't want to see a candle near a bed because it triggered that memory. Now, I can take control of that in my own home and my own space. But if I was in another person's space, it's not up to me to lash out at them for having a candle in their bedroom or near their bed, or expect them not to do that. That person didn't cause the trauma. That's up to me to address that it's something that still affects and triggers me and deal with it accordingly. Obviously, that's a very specific example, and as with everything, I would like to believe there is space for a healthy and honest conversation about why something may affect me or make me feel uptight. But in terms of actually dealing with the trigger, that's on me. And it always seems unjust that we are left with these things to process when they have originally happened at the hands of other people. So I completely get it. But we are only holding ourselves back by not taking that time to work through those triggers. Whereas I often see the advice peddled on social media that if someone triggers you, cut them out. Which is just a way to lure yourself into a false sense of security that you're healing. When you're actually just creating an echo chamber for yourself with no one to hold you accountable for things that probably simply need calling out on from time to time. No one is perfect. We all fuck up. Cutting people out who don't validate your every waking movement and behaviour is not healthy. It's giving cult. It's giving multi-level marketing Ponzi scheme. And some terms are legitimately being used completely incorrectly. People use the term trauma bonding as a way to explain friends bonding over shared conversations or experiences of trauma. That's literally not what trauma bonding is. Trauma bonding is forming an emotional bond to someone with whom you've actively experienced trauma with. It's something that usually happens in abusive relationships or situations where there is a power imbalance and cycles of intense emotional highs and lows. Stockholm Syndrome is an example of trauma bonding. And Stockholm Syndrome is an emotional attachment that can develop between captives and their captors. So trauma bonding is not discussing toxic exes over martinis. It's Beauty and the Beast. And it's completely 100% fine that people don't know what these terms mean. The issue is we hear them on social media and we run with them. They become popular, they become trendy. But mental health and actual relationship boundaries and care are not things that are a trend. They are very real issues that we deal with on a daily basis. And because they aren't being handled as such, it allows people to use TikTok therapy language to manipulate people. It allows people to use therapeutic concepts to exhibit control rather than safety. More and more people are wanting to explore therapy and talk about it, and therefore people are starting to use it as a tool to reel people in, to make people think they're grown. But unless your actions align with your therapeutic vocabulary, you're literally just using TikTok pop psychology to manipulate people for your own benefit, whether that's for sex or to control partners in relationships. Jonah Hill has been in therapy for many years. He even released a film about it on Netflix. He has been open about this side of his life. But just because he is attending therapy, it doesn't mean that therapy itself is responsible for the way he has spoken to his ex-partner, or that any therapist has presented him with the tools to do so. Boundary setting is about expressing your needs and preferences while respecting the needs and boundaries of others. It's a way to protect yourself and maintain healthy relationships. Control seeks to limit or suppress the autonomy, independence, and freedom of another person. It involves dictating what other people should do, think, feel, often without considering their individuality or preferences. Control is unhealthy and detrimental to relationships, as it disregards the importance of mutual respect and autonomy. And this trend of boundaries is looking more like misappropriated demands or ultimatums masquerading as boundaries, and then telling people that not agreeing to those demands or ultimatums violates those boundaries and allows people to victimize themselves and make themselves the hurt party in an unhealthy power and control dynamic that they created in the first place. You do not have to compromise or diminish yourself to make another person happy. And you are not a perpetrator if you don't agree to do that. They are not a victim. It's fucking nonsense. Do better, Jonah, and every other person adopting this shitty behaviour. Do the actual work. Therapy speak is rife. Yes, and it has offered us a trendy and actually pretty messed up way of relating to one another. But let's not pretend for one single second that actual therapy is at the crux of it. Run over good fucking night. Okay, now I can breathe. The episode I didn't plan on recording, but I'm glad that I did. As someone who is training to be a therapist, as someone who advocates constantly for healthy boundaries and communication, as someone who has been at the hands of a partner like this in the past, this all hit me in a place that I just needed to speak from. I really, truly hope we can move forward into a space where people are not using therapy as a manipulative tool, but as an actual place to heal and grow. I promise the porn episode is coming. But this just needed to be said. For those who have stuck with me for this rant, I salute you, honestly. I will be back very soon. But for now, thanks for coming. Thank you for tuning in to Sex on the Peach today, and I hope that you enjoyed this week's episode. You can find and follow me on Instagram, YouTube and TikTok at Sex on the Peach Cast, and you can also get in touch with me at sexonthepeachcast@gmail.com. Please do continue to like, share, subscribe, rate and review wherever you listen to your podcasts, and I'll see you next week. Love.